Hello, I'm Valerie Green. I'm a relationship coach and love expert from coachvaleriegreen.com, and welcome to the Soul Shaking Love Summit. I'm really excited because I'm here today with Jess Bonasso, and I'm really excited because she is a burnout recovery expert, and we're going to talk about how to break free from burnout for life.
Yeah.
Very
Awesome.
exciting. Hello. I'm great to
Hi.
have you here.
Thank you.
Yay.
It's good,
And yeah, it's great to have you.
it's good to be here.
Great. So I'll just read a little bit about her bio because it's very exciting. And by the way, is Bonasso the way to pronounce your name, or is it Bonasso?
No, it's been awesome. You're
Okay,
correct.
awesome. Yeah. So
Yeah.
Jess Bonasso is a burnout recovery expert who helps busy, high-reaching superheroes break free of the sabotage that leads to burnout and reignite their greatness without sacrificing their soul, sanity, or health. I love that. And as a result of learning how to overcome her own challenges with burnout, Jess now shares tools, tips, and real-world strategies on burnout recovery and prevention with other high-reaching superheroes so that they too can reignite their greatness without sacrificing their soul, sanity, or health.
That's
So
right.
that's awesome. And I mean, I'm just curious, first of all, just to hear a little bit about your story and how
Okay.
you got to be a burnout recovery expert, and just what our listeners or viewers can learn about your transformation.
Yeah. So I'll try to give you the shortened version of my story because there's a couple of chapters in that story, I'll tell you.
Of course.
But yeah, I didn't grow up with this training in place for sure. This was something that I kind of had to learn the hard way, and that was by being burned out myself. And so my own experience with burnout happened initially when I was in the corporate world. I'd been in the corporate world for about, let's say I had a career in the corporate world for 13 and a half years, and about 11 or 12 years into that, I started to have a lot of problems, physical issues. I was dealing with chronic low back pain. I was dealing with anger management issues that I'd been on medication for many years before that, trying to manage it that way. I was 40 pounds overweight. And a lot of it was because I was in a very high pressure environment. I was a senior manager of an IT development group and in charge of an entire group of developers, and we were responsible for payroll reporting for all of the call centers for the company that I worked for. And so it was a very high stress job, and I was working, I don't know, 50, 60 hours a week as a senior manager. And it was just, it was a lot of responsibility. And I really didn't at that time understand the importance of taking care of myself. I thought I was taking care of myself, but I was more focused on being there, providing, my responsibilities as a senior manager and making sure that everything was up and running, that I neglected myself greatly. And so it led to a physical breakdown. I didn't actually have like panic attacks or anything like that, but I did have, there came a day where I realized I needed to change some things, and that I didn't really like the way that my life looked, that I was really, truly unhappy doing what I was doing. And it led me on some soul searching. And as a result of that soul searching, I started to learn more about how to take better care of myself, how to stop being so negative Nelly, and really understanding the importance of positivity. I got more and more into quantum physics, law of attraction kind of ideas and things like that, more the metaphysical side of things. And I started to realize there was a lot more out there than just working my tail off so that I could make money and quote unquote be successful financially, and that my definition of success really needed to be changed. And so, up until that point, I'd been going along the idea that success meant I made lots of money. And that was because as a kid, I was raised in poverty type conditions, and had kind of adopted the belief system that success equaled money. And so I worked very hard for that in my early 20s and 30s, but it got to the point where I was like basically burned out and breaking down. My body was breaking down, and my physical, emotional well-being was breaking down. So I decided to dream a little dream, and I started envisioning what might be possible beyond the corporate world. And that's kind of what led me to decide to leave the corporate world and start my own business as a life coach that focused primarily on helping men and women take better care of themselves. I was working really hard at that for the first couple of years and started to get into a place of burnout again. Because as an entrepreneur, you wear all the hats of the business owner and you don't have a lot of help and support. And I wasn't very good at setting boundaries with my time or my energy at that point yet. Still hadn't learned that lesson completely. And so there was another layer of burnout that I had to experience. And I'm grateful for all of it. It was tough. It was challenging. But as a result, I can safely say that I've kind of transversed the challenges of burnout through my own experience, both as a corporate professional and as an entrepreneur, and really learned a lot about myself and about how to overcome burnout once and for all. And, since that happened at the beginning of my career, I've been in business now for 10 years. And the burnout that I experienced then was probably about five years ago, something like that, 4 or 5 years ago. And so since then, I've been able to really catch when things are getting a little out of control and been able to course correct and reel myself in and set boundaries as needed and all kinds of good things to help really adjust and make that work better for me. And so it's been great. And as a result, that's what I focus on now when I work with my clients. I'm really finding that most people, when they come to me, they're in some form of burnout. They're at some level of burnout. And a lot of it has to do with unhealthy patterns and behaviors that they're engaging in that they're not even doing at a conscious level. But you and I will be talking about that more. So, but that's the story. That's how I kind of got into it. And I really do consider myself a burnout recovery expert because I have been there, done that a couple times over, and I know exactly what it takes to course correct and adjust it. So
that's wonderful. I'm sure that's really inspiring. And I'm sure that a lot of our listeners and viewers can relate to that. I know I've had my own challenges, and anybody who works in the corporate world or has their own business really knows the value of being able to create those boundaries and use certain tools to keep themselves balanced. And so I'm excited to hear you share these with us.
Yeah, me too.
Yes. So first, let's talk about, how does somebody know? Our listeners might be wondering, how do I know if I'm struggling with burnout? Because a lot of times it happens slowly, right? And so, it's good to nip it in the bud.
Yeah, the initial stages of burnout, like the top levels of burnout that you typically will see, is what we would normally consider like, oh, I just feel tired a lot. I feel exhausted a lot. I feel stressed out a lot. Maybe. So stress, overwhelm, feeling really overwhelmed, like there's just not enough time in the day. I don't feel supported. I don't feel like I have, enough time, enough energy. Those are really, really common themes for people who are in burnout mode. And, burnout is something that happens over a period of time. It's not something that you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm burned out. It's something where it starts out with stress. It starts out with overwhelm, and it starts out with exhaustion, which are some of the precursory symptoms. The higher level symptoms. But if it goes unaddressed and you just are like, you put your head down, you're like, I'm just going to make it work. It'll get better. And you're doing that over a long period of time, let's say 6 months or more. It can be really detrimental to your body, your physical body. And so what starts to happen is you'll maybe start to experience a physical breakdown. You might start to have a lot of digestive issues, which is really common for people who are super stressed out. Stress in and of itself has been known heavily to cause digestive problems, and even something known as leaky gut syndrome, which is incredibly toxic to the body, where your body, like your belly, literally leaks out old food that hasn't been digested properly into your bloodstream, causing more exhaustion, more pain, inflammation in the body, that kind of thing. So you might start experiencing pain symptoms in the body. You might start to feel like your body's just not cooperating with you physically, or it might show up on the emotional side, where you start to feel really anxious a lot. Or maybe you're having a hard time focusing and concentrating. You feel like you've got a lot of symptoms of ADD or ADHD, where it's really, really hard to focus and stay on task. And then, of course, depression is also an indicator. That'd be kind of like a mid-level indicator of burnout, where you're really starting to spiral a little bit more deeper, and now you're having some emotional breakdown that comes with it. So again, if left unaddressed, this just progresses. It gets worse and worse and worse, and it can literally lead to complete breakdown in the body. I mean, I've seen people who had heart attacks as a result of unresolved stress. that has gone unaddressed for too long, and literally their body is burning out, and then they have a heart attack because of it, or something like that, or they've got liver dysfunction, thyroid dysfunction. I see that a lot in women in particular. Thyroid, it's like this silent energy zapper. Adrenal fatigue syndrome, that's really common. You see that a lot for people, and this is, again, a lot of it has to do with a lot of the overwhelming stimulus that we're exposed to. So when we're juggling our personal and our professional life, there's a lot that's going on both ends of the spectrum. And so we're constantly inundated with stimulus, and not having time for ourselves to relax and get into our parasympathetic part of our nervous system is incredibly detrimental to our body. So if we're operating in that fight or flight zone, which is the sympathetic part of our nervous system, more often than not, literally our body becomes accustomed to operating from that place, and those higher levels of cortisol, those higher levels of stress, it just takes a huge toll on the body. So it can degrade really quickly, or it can take several years. I mean, my burnout, I was in the corporate world for 13 and a half years, and my peak of my burnout didn't happen until about year 11 that I was in the corporate world. And I'm sure I was probably suffering from burnout prior to that, but it got really, really bad, and I didn't do anything about it until about 11 years into it. So
yeah, exactly.
it's kind of a mess at that point.
They say
Yeah.
you have to, really be in enough pain in order to change. So it's great that you're sharing these symptoms so people know if they're experiencing this. And if you're not just tired once in a while, but all the time, that can be a big sign.
Yeah.
And you say that it affects women more than men. So why is that?
So I have a theory about this, and this comes from, like, I've worked with a lot of mentors. In fact, I have a relationship mentor that I absolutely adore, who you might know about. Her name's Allison Armstrong.
Oh yes, I love her.
Are you familiar with her work? And so I actually, that was one of the first things that kind of woke me up to the importance of self-care, because I went to a workshop that is no longer named the Queen's Course. It's actually called something else now. But the Queen's Course was all about teaching women that came to that workshop the importance of self-care. And I was like, self-care? What? What's that? And she was the one that really helped me understand this. And one of the things that I didn't realize is, like, women have really only been in the workforce for probably less than 100 years. I mean, I think we entered the workforce right around the time that World War II started, maybe a little bit before then as well.
Exactly.
And part of that was necessity. I mean, our men were off at war, and we needed to be able to provide support for our families. And so we came into the workforce, and then it just stuck. It took, and we stayed in there. And for equality purposes, that's wonderful. I mean, I'm all about, equality. Absolutely. But from a social standpoint, when you look at this from a sociological standpoint, what has happened is there's been an extreme masculinization of women as a result of women entering the workforce. And so now we're, typically we were in the caregiver roles, which is an innate biological instinct of ours, because if you go back to caveman, cavewoman days, that's kind of what we're hardwired to be, is the nurturer, the caregiver. And then you're putting us, not you, but we're putting ourselves in a provider role that comes with a very different level of focus and attention from what is innate and biological to us. It's being in single focus mode all the time, which is a very masculine energy trait. Being action-oriented, goal-oriented, task-oriented, those are all things that we are certainly capable of easily, but they're not our natural defaults. It's not who we are biologically speaking, biologically wired to be. We have other assets that work better for us, right? And so as a result of us being put into this environment where we're expected to look, think, and act like a man, maybe not look so much like a man anymore, that's changing a little bit, but where we're expected to be very much like a man in that environment in order to be successful, it's put a lot of undue pressure on us as women. And so what happens is we're the caregivers at home, and we're taking care of the kids, and hopefully our partners are helping out with that, which is new for them as well. So now they've got extra added stressors, but we're taking care of our family, and then we're also going and being the provider. So we're being both the caretaker and the provider, and then men are being both the provider and the caretaker. So there's added stress on both sides. But for women in particular, because we are such caregivers at a biological level, I call this human animal side of us, because we're hardwired for that, we have a tendency to sacrifice ourselves. and take care of everybody else's needs before our own. And we negate self-care more than men do. Men naturally, they're like, hey, if I need some exercise, they'll go get it, you know. And I'm sure there are some sociological factors that prevent them from doing that at times too. But it's their relationship to self-care is very different than ours is. Ours is like, yeah, that's the last thing in the world I'm going to do unless there's time for it. And because we're juggling our personal and professional life now in a way we never have before, there really isn't time for it unless we're very cognizant, very aware that we need to take that time for ourselves. And so for women in particular, self-care is absolutely critical. It's absolutely vital for our sanity, you know, our health, our wealth. It's absolutely critical. And so that's why I see a lot of women coming into my practice now, my client practice. This is happening more and more frequently with women. And I even heard of a study that was done where it said 75% of women in the workforce had complained of stress-related anxiety and symptoms that they were experiencing, and only 45% of those women in the workforce, 45% of the 75, actually went in and got treatment from their primary care physicians for it. So, I mean, that's really telling, is that a very small percentage of our population is actually willing to go and get some help for it or take care of themselves for it. They're just putting their head down and trying to be like a man and take care of it. And they're finding that they don't have energy at the end of the day to make that work. It's just not sustainable. And so women in particular are more effective than men for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And I know there's a lot of controversy around the biological differences between men and women, but regardless, if we are doing a lot of caretaking, then I think that as women, we do have the role, especially for the first few years of a child's life, we are biologically wired to be the caretaker. I mean, just in terms of even if feeding is concerned, naturally. And, you know, we bond very deeply with the people that we're taking care of. And I find that nobody really teaches us how to take care of ourselves.
No.
Kind of like, you know, on an airplane, how they say, put your own oxygen mask on first before you help someone else.
Exactly. I mean, that's like the only place that I have ever remember being taught to take care of yourself first.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Like, we didn't really receive any training on it.
Yeah, I was raised by my dad. My dad knew nothing about that. But even if I'd been raised by my mom, I don't think my mom really knew anything about that either. I mean, she worked pretty heavily in the workforce as well. And, you know, I don't know that she ever experienced burnout the way that I did, but it wasn't something that we were innately taught. Most of us are not taught that. So unless you're raised by a parent who understands the importance of this, you're probably not going to get it from the school system. They're not going to teach you.
Right. No, exactly. I mean, our society right now is just a lot. We're exposed to so much more stimulus than ever, and our attention is drawn to so many other places than ever. And so it's increasingly needed to be able to have some kind of practice to come back to ourselves.
Yeah. And to that point, you talk about attention span, you know, that masculine energy of being in single focus mode and having to sit down and focus on a task one at a time. We can do that as women, but if we're not taking care of ourselves, our ability to stay in single focus mode is greatly diminished. And so we become highly distractible. That's why one of the reasons why I say an inability to focus, like the ADD type symptoms, especially for women, that's a really, really big indicator that your self-care is missing. It's lacking.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so what's the antidote to burnout?
Well, we've been talking about it a little bit. So I really, truly, personally feel that self-care is absolutely the number one most important thing you can do to prevent burnout and also to recover from it. And when I talk about self-care, I'm not talking about going to the spa and getting manicures and pedicures and a massage every month. I mean, certainly that can be some people's version of self-care. But what I'm talking about is taking care of yourself mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Really looking at your life and stepping back, you know, because a lot of what I do is life coaching. I like to call it life coaching on steroids because some of the work that I do is obviously helping people figure out where they're at in their life and what they're happy with and what they're not happy with. But a big part of what I do is help people get to the root cause of why things are not the way they are, whether it's limiting beliefs that are holding them back, mindset issues. There could be cellular memory patterns that they're unaware of, or personality styles and fixations that they are engaging in that they just don't have an awareness of. And so really helping increase a person's knowledge of themselves. So really heavy self-discovery is a huge part of the self-care process. It's about learning who you are and what makes you tick and what energizes you, what fuels you, what drains you, understanding what it is that's causing you to do the things that you do that aren't necessarily serving you. It's really a lot of personal growth, a lot of personal growth based type self-care. And so when I work with clients, a lot of what I'll do is I'll have them go through and fill out like a self-care assessment wheel and really rate every single area of their life on a scale of 1 to 10. And then our job as we work together is to figure out what is it that's missing in each of those areas. And then we create self-care rituals that are uniquely designed to help align them to whatever it is that's going to help them fill in what's missing. That's the first part. And then the second part is to help them uncover the self-sabotaging parts of their life that prevent them from getting where they want to be and actually getting to the root cause of that. So it's 2 parts. One is self-care, and the second part is really going in and healing the pain of the past and figuring out how to transcend your conditioning. So taking care of yourself is the first step, and healing the pain of the past and any conditioning or trauma that is preventing you from getting you where you want to go is the second step. And they're kind of intertwined, but self-care is so important. It's probably the number one thing I can recommend.
Exactly. And so if somebody wanted some practical strategies to implement in all those areas right now, there's the physical, there's the emotional, there's the spiritual. Mm-hmm. What are some examples of ways of taking care of yourself in each of those areas?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, on the physical side, I just think, regular exercise, even if you're not the kind of person that really digs exercise, like there's something for everyone. I mean, if you don't want to go run on a treadmill, then go to a yoga class 3 times a week and practice gentle yoga, or for that matter, go to restorative yoga where you're just laying in a pose for like 10 minutes straight and you're not having to do anything hard. You're just relaxing, There's so many things that people can do exercise related that are going to help them manage their stress levels more effectively, help them reduce cortisol. So exercise absolutely on the physical level. Also food dietary intake is absolutely critical. I didn't realize this when I was younger, but I mean, I was eating horrible things, putting things into my body that really exacerbate stress. I was really heavily dependent on coffee to keep me going, which is, I love the taste of coffee, but at the end of the day, it's not very good for your nervous system if you've been running in high energy fight or flight mode all the time. It's not going to make things better. It's going to make it worse. So really paying attention to the food that you're putting into your body and just making some dietary changes to eat healthier foods that are not so processed or not so false energy type things that are going to alleviate your energy levels in false ways. So that's on the physical level. On the emotional level, I think just learning how to manage your emotions. A lot of us, we don't really give ourselves permission to feel what we're feeling. We kind of like pretend like it's not happening. We avoid it. And the old saying, what you resist persists. Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of the reason why we end up struggling with anxiety and stress and depression on the burnout spectrum is because we're so busy trying to get everything done and trying to be supermen and women that we don't take time to process stuff that comes up for us. And so if we do have some sort of a traumatic event that happens, we compartmentalize it, we stuff it, we say, oh, I can't deal with that right now. I've got to go get my happy hat on and pretend like everything is okay, and I can't show anybody that I have a weakness or that I'm vulnerable. And so we don't share that, we don't express it.
Mm-hmm. And take time to really feel it and process it,
right,
through journaling or however else we process our
however
feelings.
You're going to do it. Yeah. And a lot of people don't know how to express emotion. And so what happens is that it starts to show up in outbursts of rage and anger management issues. I mean, like the problems that I was having in my early 20s had everything to do with me trying to be superwoman and prove that I had value to offer in my organization. And it was a very masculine energy-based organization. There were a lot of men in that org. We had a few women, but a lot of these women were basically just dressed like men and acting like men. And so I didn't have a role model that taught me how to take care of myself. And so I had a lot of bottled up feelings, emotions, and energy that just had nowhere to go. And emotion is energy in motion. If it's not moving through you, it'll stay stuck and actually become cellular memory patterns that turn into chronic emotional issues like depression and anger management and anxiety, or worse, physical dis-ease in the body. I mean, I've seen a lot of times, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, those are definitely, I feel like, emotionally based issues that people are dealing with. And, there are books out there that You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. God bless her soul. She just passed. But it's a great book where you can go look up like migraines or headaches or, arm pain, foot pain, et cetera. And you can go look in and see what the emotional probable cause is. And a lot of times you'll find that it's really accurate. And if you can go in and really process around that emotional piece that's stuck or missing, you might be able to resolve the physical things that are going on. And that's a lot of the work that I do, is working with people at that cellular level and helping them get to the root cause of what's causing their emotional outbursts and their physical outbursts and things like that. So that's what I would suggest on the emotional level, is just learning how to process emotions and giving yourself permission to feel things. And then on the spiritual level, it's really just getting connected to anything that excites you, delights you, inspires you, nurtures you. I just feel like all of those things kind of fall into the spiritual category. It's like just anything, like, for example, working in your job, unless it's a career path that you absolutely love and adore and allows you to be of a purpose and contribution in really big ways, and you're thriving super big time in that area, your career tends to not be necessarily a spiritual thing. But I think that in general, if you can do things that you love and move away from the human animal side, things, like when I say human animal, what I'm talking about is taking care of our base needs, right? So if all you're focusing on is money and having a house and making sure you have enough, food on the table, like, that's great. We want to be able to do that, but that's all base level needs. You want to get beyond that, higher than that, and start to think about, how can I live my life more on purpose? How can I be of greater contribution? What are my passions? What's my purpose? If you've got, a spiritual upbringing, whether it's, a religious upbringing, or you just happen to be spiritual, how are you engaging in that? What are you learning? What kinds of personal growth and development are you engaging in to help you take your life to the next level, to help you become more of the hero that you are? I talk a lot with my clients about becoming your own hero, and walking the hero's path is about figuring out, what are my core values? What are the things that I want to align to in my life that really mean something to me, that give my life greater purpose and meaning? So anything that falls into that category, even if it's just spending time with friends and family and really honoring those moments, that can be very spiritual as well. Nurturing your relationships, like you're talking about, soul-shaking love, having a soul-shaking relationship, that could be very spiritual in nature as well. And fostering that. If you're not happy with your spouse, like, what are you doing? What rituals are you doing to make that better? Are you having date night on a regular basis? Are you, engaging in acts of intimacy that are meaningful and loving and kind, and, who knows, right? So
exactly. And I find a lot of times when people come to me and they're very critical of their partner, that it's because that they're not focusing on what would help them to feel, balanced. They're not really doing things on a regular basis for their own pleasure. They're really relying on their partner, like, he's supposed to be doing X, Y, and Z, and he's not, and that might be true. But if you come at it from that standpoint and making him wrong, then it's not going to inspire him. But if you're really focusing on your own, like, to take care of your own needs, and what are they? Your emotional needs, your, like, I love how you put the connections with friends and family and your values in spiritual category, because it doesn't have to be something really grandiose. It could just be, what really lights me up today, and you're really focusing on that. You're not, you're meeting your own needs first. Then when you go to connect with your partner and ask them for things, then you can be coming from a place where you're grounded and already feeling good. And then he's likely to be able to hear you.
Yeah, because then at that point you're giving of yourself from a place of fullness, rather than drain and lack and scarcity of I'm not full, I'm not full, I'm not full. Like, that's why self-care is so important. Like, self-care literally has the power to transform any area of your life. I don't care what area it is, whether it's wealth and prosperity, career, friends and family, relationship, it doesn't matter. Self-care is always, if you're not taking care of yourself, then what goes on outside of you and external to you is always a mirror for what's either going on or not going on inside, and so if you're not being supported by your friends and family in your relationship, you're probably also not supporting yourself. And that's the first place to start for that to transform. Because like you said, as we start to take better care of ourselves, then we're giving from a place of fullness. We're not giving from a place of neediness, where we are now being these self-sacrificers and having all kinds of pent-up resentment and anger and bitterness underneath it all, because our needs are not getting met. When in reality, it's us. We're the ones that need to meet our needs.
Exactly. And of course, once we are, then we can ask for things, but coming from a more grounded place where we're not, just like you said, being angry, we're really being able to speak about it in a rational way that's likely to get heard because we're centered.
Yeah, it's more of a human spirit way of interacting and engaging rather than human animal.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's how Alison Armstrong talks about it. And I do recommend her work to those who are watching or listening, because she really is a unique teacher about male-female dynamics. And I really love her work. She makes the distinction between, the human animal part of us and the human spirit part of us. And I like to say that we're human beings. So there's two parts of us. There's the human part and the being part.
Right.
And the human part is a lot of the day-to-day stuff, but the being part is, what inspires me, what lights me up today? How can I take care of my emotional, spiritual needs and relationships and have them really be elevated to an inspiring place in my life? And that's the being part.
I agree 100%. Very different than doing. Doing is what leads us into burnout. Being is what lights up our life and elevates us. So you have to have both, but you really want to balance it. And the more you can be in the beingness, the more you can operate from human spirit rather than human animal. So I love how you drew that correlation, because it's completely on point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so what are 3 really quick tips if women are hearing this and saying, I'm so busy, I don't know how I can make this part of my life? What are some very quick tips that people can apply right now?
Yeah. So, I think the first thing is, a lot of people talk about, I don't have enough time. That's a bunch of baloney. You are the person that regulates your calendar and regulates your schedule and regulates what you will and what you will not do. So the first thing that you need to do is really figure out how to create time and space in your calendar for some kind of regular and consistent self-care practice. And even if you just start out with one self-care ritual that you do on a regular basis, it doesn't even have to be every day. If it's, let's say you decide, wow, I know that when I exercise, that really helps my stress levels, and I really want to set the intention to exercise 3 times a week, even though right now is a crazy busy time. Then what you do is you figure out where it makes the most sense to have that self-care time, and you start setting some boundaries around that time period. You time block it. You put it in your calendar. You make it a priority. You do not schedule over it, under it, around it, or put any activities going on around it that are going to impact or come into conflict with that. And you make it a priority, and you try it for 3 or 4 weeks and just see how you feel at the end of the 3 or 4 weeks. If you feel the same, then, you might want to maybe up that ritual. If you're only doing it 1 day a week, exercising 1 day a week, that might not be enough. And so you might want to adjust the ritual along the way and make sure that you are putting it into effect in a way that you actually can feel the benefits and the results. Because if you don't feel the benefits, you're not going to keep doing it. So it's got to be something that you actually can adhere to, number one, and can see the results from. So you want to start out with small baby steps. And like I said, even if it's just something simple, like let's say you're so out of shape and you don't have energy to do the exercise, then maybe go to a restorative yoga class a couple times a week. Something super simple and easy, right? So you pick a ritual that's going to make the biggest difference overall with the least amount of impact on your life, and the greatest chance of success. I think that's the most important thing. And you try that first. So the self-care piece, regular, consistent self-care for a minimum of 3 to 4 weeks. That's the first tip that I would suggest. The second tip is, when it comes to managing your time, most of us think about time management in terms of priorities and more linear type functions. Like I've got this, and this to do today. This is at 8 o'clock. This is at 10 o'clock. This is at whatever. And that's all good and well. But if you jam pack your day full of doing activities and there's no being activities in there, you're doing yourself a disservice. And a lot of times what happens is we jam pack our days and we fill them with energy draining activities that literally just zap the life out of us. And then we wonder why we're so exhausted at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So what I talk about when I'm working with people who are dealing with this time management issue is I talk about really looking at time management more as energy management rather than time management. And so it's like, how am I managing my energy levels throughout the day? And if you get up in the morning and you look at your day and you immediately have a sinking feeling in your stomach, like, oh my God, today's going to suck, I'm going to be exhausted at the end of the day, that means that you probably have overdone it. You've overbooked yourself, overcommitted yourself. And if there's any way for you to adjust your schedule that day to maybe throw something in midday that's energy fueling in nature, that helps you restore your energy levels, whatever that is. I've had times where I just go lay down in Shavasana on the bed for 15 minutes because that's all I have to spare. And I set a timer and I just chill out and I let my body relax for 15 minutes laying down in corpse pose. And it's a very simple little reset, but it resets your nervous system and it gives you the ability to hop back on and get back to being focused and a little bit more energized than you were before you started it. So it's like fitting in something throughout your day. Every day is ideal, but if you can't do it every day and you've got a series of, let's say you have 3 days in a row where you're going to be really, really busy, when you're planning out your calendar, pay attention to how many activities are going on. And if you start to feel like your day that day or those couple of days are going to be too busy, figure out where you can put some energy fueling activities in there. And so really it's about load balancing your energy fueling and energy draining activities. Super, super important.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. So that's why I say energy management rather than time management. And I've seen it change both men and women's lives tremendously when it's implemented. And when you keep an eye on it and you're really mindful about that practice, but it takes practice. So it's like not something you're going to get overnight. And what I do is I actually time block out time for self-care every morning during the week. And I do not schedule anything around it to make sure that I've got enough things to fuel me throughout the week so that I'm focused and in a place where I need to be when I'm working with my clients and when I'm working on my business. And if I don't do self-care in the mornings, I'm a red hot sloppy mess, and I know it. So it's taken me many, many years of not having it in place and not being consistent with it to realize, okay, this has to happen. This has to happen. It's a requirement, and there's no turning back. So that would be my second tip, is the energy management piece. And then the third piece would be around setting boundaries. And the person you have to start with is yourself. In particular with women, because we're the caregivers and the nurturers, we want to say yes to everyone. Men have this issue sometimes as well, but we can't do everything. We're not superwomen. We're not meant to be superwomen. We're not supermen. I mean, like, yes, we have those tendencies and we have the ability to really stand up and shine in those moments. But at the end of the day, if you say yes to everything, you will be overcommitted and you will burn yourself out. So learning how to set boundaries in a way that honors everyone involved is really, really important. And I'll give you an example of that. Like, let's say somebody says, like, for example, I'll give you 2 examples. So I see clients on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And if I have a client that's like, well, what's your schedule look like on Tuesdays and Thursdays? And I'm like, I see clients on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. My next available appointment is on this day at this time. So one of these days will have to work. Which one of these times works for you? And I'll give them one of the times that I have available. And I set that boundary because I know that if I have 2 client days in a row, because of the time, the energy that it requires of me, I'm going to be exhausted at the end of day 2 and probably not very good towards the second part of that second day, So I make sure I have a day in between each of my client days to focus on something other than clients so that I can refuel and recharge and focus in a new way. And since I've had that in place, it's really, really, really helped me. It's been an excellent tool for me, and it works really well. Now, on the flip side, there's also people who are like, hey, I really want to get together with you this weekend, or we have this party that's going on, and you realize, wow, I've already got like 20 things going on this weekend, and even though I really want to go to that, then I just think about it, and I've got all this resistance, and I'm like, that just doesn't feel good, right? If you pay attention to how you feel and you sense resistance of any kind when somebody asks you for your help, asks you to come to something, what I always do by default is, because you can't always figure out what the resistance is about in that moment. I just say, you know what, that sounds like a lot of fun. Let me check my calendar and get back to you. And then when I have time and space to go in and process what that resistance was all about and really get a feel for how do I really feel about this? if I say yes to this, how am I going to feel? Am I going to be pissed off? Am I going to be resentful? Do I want to put myself in a position where I feel that way because I said yes? No, I don't want to do that. So I'll say no. I'll get back and say, you know what, unfortunately, it's not going to work out for me to help you out with that. But, you know, you can always offer up another alternative, or you can just say, it's not going to work out for me to help out with that. And there's lots of ways where you can say no in a nice way where it allows you to say yes to you. So like in those morning hours where I have my self-care time, if somebody says, hey, what about meeting for coffee at 8 o'clock on this day and this time? I'm like, you know, unfortunately, I only do coffee meetings on Thursdays, and I'm available between 10 and 4.
Exactly.
So I set those boundaries with that. So boundary setting is absolutely critical. And I would say boundary setting is actually probably, even though I gave it as the third tip, it's probably the tip that's going to help you make space for tip number 1, the self-care ritual.
Right, of course.
And also time and space for tip number 2, which is bringing in more energy fueling activities and load balancing them. So maybe that's the most important tip.
Thanks. That's so helpful. And I time block my self-care in the morning too, because if I don't do self-care every day, then I am not really fully able to help other people.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I've learned that over time too. And I highly recommend really blocking it out in your calendar.
Yeah, it works. It works amazingly well when you stick to it.
Right, exactly.
when you follow your time blocking, it works amazingly well.
yeah, exactly. And I always like to say yesterday is your teacher. So like look back at what happened yesterday and see how that impacts you, and that's how you learn, right?
Oh, that is so critical. I love that you brought that up. I think one of the biggest forms of self-sabotage that I see clients suffering with is feeling like a failure because they didn't get it right the first time, the second time, the third time, etc. And you know, I've learned over the years, I used to have a lot of stress and anxiety over not getting stuff done right the first time. But now if it doesn't work out after I've implemented something or tried something, I'm like, okay, that didn't work. Now I know what not to do.
Right,
like
exactly.
What's the benefit of this to me? You know, what am I learning about myself? How can I gain value from this? Even if it was like the worst thing that could have ever happened to me ever. I'm like, okay, that sucks, but how is this a benefit to me? What am I learning about myself? You know,
exactly.
Sometimes it's core values. Sometimes it's like, ooh, yeah, I was really kind of a jerk. I realized that I need to be really practicing self-care more often.
Yeah, exactly. And what could you do differently next time? Or
Exactly.
what was missing that I could add, you know, rather than making yourself wrong, because that's
Right.
never helpful.
Yeah. And I will tell you, you know, nobody, as human beings, we are not wired to get things right the first time. Like if we get it right the first time, then that's awesome. You know, huge kudos to us, but we really are designed to learn through repetition and consistency. That's how we move to a level of self-mastery. You can't get to self-mastery without the repetition and consistency.
Yeah.
Without repeating things over and over and over again until you get it right. That's why the self-care is so important, because self-care really is the path from that, like when you start out, you go, oh, there's a problem, you're in self-discovery mode. Then you start to take action repetitiously and consistently. That's the self-care mode. And then once you've been practicing self-care in that area for long enough, at some point you're going to become the master in that area. You've reached a point of self-mastery. So this is literally, self-care is the path to self-mastery, to being your very own hero. That's what I talk to my clients about all the time. So
I love that.
Yeah.
So
there you have it.
And I know you have a free gift to offer everyone who's watching or listening. So tell us about that and how to access it.
Yeah, so I offer a complimentary self-care toolkit to anyone that decides they want to take advantage of that. All you have to do is visit my website, which is www.radiantselfcare.com, and sign up for my newsletter, which is it's a goddess guidance newsletter. I send out a note once a month or so, giving you tips and ideas on how to take better care of yourself, how to practice self-discovery and self-mastery, how to really become your very own hero. So it's jam-packed full of goodies. And also alert you on, you know, upcoming retreats, because I do self-care retreats and immersions throughout the year. But the great thing about the toolkit is a couple of things. First of all, they're in that toolkit, they'll get a self-care assessment toolkit, or assessment, which gives them the ability to do the assessment that I use with my clients, and also gives them some initial first steps that they can take to get themselves back on track. It's a really powerful little workbook that I put together to help with that. And then there's also 108 ways to take care of yourself.
Oh, great.
to practice self-care. So a lot of those are like for people who struggle with, well, I don't even know what self-care looks like and I don't know what fuels me. This list is awesome because it'll give you ideas like taking a walk in nature, for example, might be something that would fuel you, or spending time with your dog, or, you know, things that you wouldn't normally think of as energy fueling. Those are going to be in that list. And then there's also 9 ways to say yes to you, which is a list of ways to say no to others in a way that honors both of you.
That's so wonderful. I haven't looked at your list yet. I'm going to go look at it now.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome. So then it gives you the ability to set better boundaries. I like to say that it gives you the ability to set boundaries like a badass.
Yeah, I like it.
Hopefully it's okay for me to say that.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's okay if you think it's okay.
Yeah. So come to my website, sign up for the newsletter, and you'll automatically get the toolkit if you're interested in becoming your very own hero and taking the initial first step.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and I'm posting the link to that below this video or audio.
Awesome.
So
Thank
people
you.
can access it. And I just feel really inspired. I didn't do all my self-care this morning, so I'm going to go meditate this afternoon as part of my day.
All right. Fantastic.
Yeah, so I hope that everyone's enjoyed watching and listening, and that you check out the toolkit, because I feel really inspired, and I hope that everyone does too.
Cool.
So
Thanks
it's
so
been
much.
a pleasure.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you on this little journey that you've created for all your peeps. It's been a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. So until next time.
Take care, hon.